Hello, my name is Eric Combs and I'm the beginning band director in Olney, Illinois at the Richland County Middle School. I'm also the creator of the Sound Beginnings Beginner Band Series. A little bit about our program. Our little rural school has been named 3 years in a row a Support Music Merit Award winner through the NAM Foundation's Best Community for Music Education program. We've also been recognized by Congress twice in the last 5 years. This video is going to talk about how we learn rhythm at Richland County Middle School. It's going to be in 3 parts. You're watching part 1. Part 1 is the theory behind this rhythm, an explanation of why it works so well. It also talks about how this rhythm leads to musical literacy. In part 2 and 3, you're going to see actual classroom footage of us learning about 16th notes, learning to be fluent in literacy while reading 16th notes. If you'd like to skip ahead and see just the classroom side of it and watch some actual class sessions, then go on to video 2 and then video 3. If you'd like to stick around and see the lecture side of it and see why this theory works so well and why it builds to literacy, then stay right here and watch session 1.
I think that the vast majority of us can agree that rhythm is one of the really big problems that we have in our ensembles. And it's usually manifested in the simple question that we get constantly. How does this go? Basically, the student's telling us when they say that, I can't read this for myself. Can you please tell me how to read this? This leads to sight reading difficulties. We give kids a new piece of music and we ask them to read it, but they can't do it. So as we sight read a song, we might find that half the band's on measure 10, the other half's on measure 12, they're not all on the same beat, and you really can't do anything as far as balancing chords or listening for intonation. If everybody's in the wrong spot, it's just going to sound like cacophony. Also, problems that we might see arise from this is from transferring a rhythm from one piece to the next. In other words, you teach a rhythm in one song, and then the kids see the exact same rhythm again in another song, but they can't make the connection and they can't read it. Sometimes it's kind of frustrating as a teacher to think, hey, I just taught you this in exercise 20. Why can't you play it in exercise 21? Now, we might ask ourselves also, why is this such a huge problem? What has gone wrong? And I'm sorry to tell you, I'm going to be kind of blunt here, but the answer is kind of obvious. The problem is, it's because our students are rhythmically illiterate. They can't read rhythm. That's why when they see it in one song and you tell them how it goes by rote, they don't know how to read it in the next song. So the solution is to teach rhythm in some way that leads to literacy. Now a little bit about my own personal rhythm teaching journey. Whenever I started teaching music about 14 years ago, rhythm was a huge challenge for me as well. And it was a stumbling block that took me quite a while to overcome. My first several years, I didn't have much success. I actually taught rhythm backwards of how I do now. In fact, almost exactly backwards of how I do now. In other words, I would teach by, first, showing the written notation. How many of us do this? You say, open up your book to example number 50. Take a look at this new thing that you see. Then I would go into a theoretical explanation of this new concept, and I'd do it in as most detail as I possibly could, because the more words you use, the better, right? After this explanation, I'd want to see if the kids could figure it out on their own. So I would attempt to have the kids read the example by themselves. This always leads to them failing miserably, every single time. And what eventually happens is I would ask them to go practice at home. Because if I've told them how to do it, they should understand it, right? And they should be able to go home, practice on it for a week, and come back able to play it. But we all know that's not what happens. Ultimately, they come back the next week, they can't play it correctly, they've learned it incorrectly, which is really bad in and of itself because they've drilled it over and over and over again wrong, and now we have to have them unlearn it. Probably a better scenario would be they went home and they realized they had no clue what they were doing, so they didn't practice it at all. It's probably even better than practicing it wrong for a week. So, ultimately, you end up playing or singing it to him, and you're teaching it to him by rote, basically showing him how it goes. The problem with this is the kids only learned how the song goes, but not how to read notation. And again, that leads to the problem of not being able to transfer a concept from one example to the next example. And this just snowballs from year to year to year, and you find out that you think your band's doing super good because they're able to read a certain grade level of song, so you go to pass out something a little bit harder, and you realize they still don't know how to read. The sight reading still doesn't go well. So what do we do about this? Well, my turning point in my life was I got a hold of this book called Teaching Rhythm by David Newell. I got to tell you that I have read a ton of books geared toward band directors in my life. And of all of them that I've ever read, this has been the one that has been the most influential to me and has changed my teaching the most. If you were to get one book on how to teach music, I would recommend Teaching Rhythm by David Newell. Now, this isn't something that he has told me to say. He's not making any money off of me saying this. I'm not making any money off of me saying this. I will say, though, that after picking up David's book, I used it for a couple of years, and I had tremendous success. So I ended up reaching out to Mr. Newell and telling him about this. This led to several conversations, and it ultimately led to us becoming friends. I finally got to meet him in person in December at the Midwest Clinic in Chicago. We went out to dinner. I was able to get him to sign my book for me, and we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things we talked about was me doing this presentation. So I'm happy to say that I've got Mr. Newell's blessing to do this, and that I'm running it all by him before I publish it to you, so that he can put his seal of approval on it. I'm also excited to say that Mr. Newell is now working on making some videos of his own. So after I publish this one, I'm excited to see some of them that he publishes as well. Something that I want you to know about this book, Teaching Rhythm, is it's not a new concept. However, it is one that's pretty foreign to us as beginning band directors. The concept can be traced back to Edwin Gordon's music learning theory. This music learning theory is something that's very widely used in the general music curriculum, also the Suzuki method, but it is not used very widely in the beginning band world. In fact, I think it's fairly unknown and overlooked to us band directors. The music learning theory is a process of teaching young musicians to be literate in music, much the same way that humans become literate in their native languages. Let's take a quick look at how we became literate in speaking English and writing English. First, as babies, we started babbling. We listened to others, mainly our parents, our siblings, and we heard what they had to say. We didn't really know what it meant right at first, but we listened. We began slowly to draw word associations. We began to know what the word mom meant, what dad meant, dog. After this, we started to imitate others. We would hear sounds that they were saying, and as we were babbling, our babbling would start to make sense. We would start saying things like daddy, mommy. We then began making meaningful words, as I just mentioned. Then thoughts, and then complete sentences. Gradually, we began to converse with others and became fluent at speaking. And as somebody who has 2 daughters of my own, you know that it's exciting when that happens, but once it does, you kind of wish it hadn't, because they start doing it all the time. Eventually, and this takes quite a bit of time, we're talking 4 years here, eventually we learned what we already know looks like. That's when we go to school and we start learning about the alphabet. We start learning about short words. we started reading small words that we already knew, like dog or ball or bat. And as we're doing this and we're seeing what the written notation for what we already know how to say looks like, we gradually start making sentences, then paragraphs, or reading sentences, then paragraphs, and then finally we're reading books. After all of that, we finally started writing and learning the theory behind all of this. And by the theory, I mean the English classes, where we learn how to make a sentence. We learn the parts of the sentence. We learn how to construct a paragraph. We learn how to do a chapter, an entire report. This is the natural way of learning a language. Now, let's think about the process here. First, we speak, we hear, we have sound, we imitate, and once we're fluent in that, in this case, over the course of about 4 years, finally, the written notation is introduced. So we become very fluent in conversing and speaking and making sound, and then finally, once we totally comprehend what it is that we're saying, we see the abstract notation. So this is how this relates to music and the music learning theory. First, we babble on our instruments. One of the very first things that I have beginners do is start making noise on their instrument. I don't show them notation. I show them their first 5 fingerings, and then I just have them start making noise, learning how to produce sound on the instrument. And that might take a day or two, but I want them to get comfortable with the speaking. We're not going to read anything until we can actually produce that sound. It's kind of pointless to try to read something when you can't even produce it. We listen. I give examples, and I play things for them, and they hear what it sounds like. And then we copy. Teacher plays something, the kids echo. We become fluent in audiating the sound and producing the sound. Audiating means simply being able to hear something in your mind's ear. So by listening, our mind becomes accustomed to that. We can hear it inside our heads, and we become fluent in actually doing the thing. The video that I'm going to be showing you in part 2, we're going to be learning 16th notes. So it gets the kids familiar with the sound of 16th notes and also the physical, the feeling of producing 16th notes. Only once all of that is done, only once they are physically able to play 16th notes, do they even see what they look like. It's pointless to see them if they can't even do them. So they get fluent in that, and then I introduce the written notation. We play while looking at the notation. Teacher plays, they listen, they echo, and they do this while looking at the notation. And then the kids begin to connect how what they can already do looks like. And in that method, the students become fluent readers. After all of that is done, then we start to learn the theory. Like, hey, these are 16th notes, they've got 2 beams, there's 16 of them in a measure of 4/4. That kind of theory.
Imagine for a moment that I was going to try to teach you hieroglyphics. In fact, you had enrolled in a class with me, and it was my job to make sure you were literate in reading hieroglyphics. So what I decided to do, in my infinite wisdom, is if I want you to be able to read these things, I'm going to give you a full page of them, and I'm going to say that in 9 weeks, I want you to get up in front of about 500 people, and I want you to just recite this entire page. And I'll say that after you've done this, you've learned how to read it, and you're now literate. So I hand it to you, and I know that you've never seen this stuff before. The symbols make absolutely no sense to you. So what I do is I start telling you word for word what every single one of them means. And then I tell you, take this home and I want you to practice it. So you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to go home and you're going to try to practice it, you're going to get it all wrong because you can't remember what I said, or you're just not going to practice it at all because you just simply don't know what's going on. Whenever you come back, I ask you to recite it, and obviously you probably can't remember much of it, so you recite back a little bit to me. And out of frustration, what I do is I start going back through word for word and having you memorize every single word. This goes on for 9 weeks. Finally, after 9 weeks, we have memorized the entire page. So I have you get up in front of an audience and you recite it perfectly, the crowd goes wild, and everybody says, hey, this person's learned how to read hieroglyphics. So then you enroll for my next 9 weeks class, and I give you another paper. Has the exact same symbols on it, just in a different order, and I say, here, we've learned how to do this. I'm going to have you read this one. Sight read it. And to my horror, I find out that you can't say a single word. What has happened here is I have given you the symbol first, the written word, but you have nothing in your mind to associate with this. You're looking at an abstract idea, but you have no preconceived notion. So you can't make any connections. You start memorizing stuff word for word, but you're not making a connection with what's written. So obviously that's going to fail. But if you think about it, that is what we do with our music students a lot of the time. We give them this written notation first, and we say, here, look at this. But it's an abstract idea for something that they don't already hear in their minds, so they can't make any connections. And what they end up doing is they start memorizing what it is that you are spouting off to them, different rhythms, different melodies, and they get to where they can recite those in front of an audience, and they sound good, but the audience doesn't know they're illiterate. You give them the exact same musical notation in a different order, and they can't make the connection. They never learn how to read it. And then you have to start the cycle over again, and you have to teach every single thing by rote.
In video 2, you're going to see that I use several slides on the TV overhead. And I want you to know that these slides are available to you. They are in my Google Drive folder, and that folder is pinned to my Facebook site. So if you go to my Facebook site, Thoughts from a Beginning Band Director, you'll see that it is the post that is pinned to the top of the page.
Once you open my Google Drive folder, you'll see that I have several folders, and I have some individual files down at the bottom. Lots of stuff here. We're looking for a folder called Rhythm Slides PC. Currently, the Rhythm Slides Mac is not operating correctly. I'm going to have to fix that. I have a PC. So I'm going to open up this Rhythm Slides PC folder. And then you'll see that there are a lot of different folders just based on the rhythm that you're going to be teaching. I'm going to be teaching 16th notes in this presentation, so I'm opening folder 9, 16th notes. There are 3 different types of drills. What I'll be using in class for these demonstrations is folder 3, which is just called drill. I'm going to open it. 6 different drills, all using the exact same rhythms, just in different orders. Here I'm opening number 1. And this just shows you some of the PowerPoint slides. They will show up as individual slides on the TV in front of the classroom, and I can toggle between slides with my right and left button. I can actually put it on a blank slide so that they see nothing but a blank screen, or I can put it on a rhythm slide. Now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to show you what file number 1 is, drill with counts. Here we have the exact same slides, but they show you the counting words underneath them. If you'd like to use this after you've done the entire exercise and you'd like to show the kids more of a theoretical explanation about the rhythms. And finally, if you'd like to have the kids tell you themselves, you can open up this folder 2, drill with counts, and you can see that each slide progressively adds the next number or letter, and you can ask the kids what comes next, and they're going to say, hopefully, and there you go. You can slide to it and show them that's correct. And as you toggle through these slides, the rhythms stay frozen on the screen. It just continues to add numbers, and it goes through each of these rhythms.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that I'm going to use in video number 2. It's a very simple process, and it takes very little talking on the teacher's part, which is one of the great things about it. And what I'm going to show you is a very watered down version. I'm going to make it short and just kind of give you the highlights. If you like it, check out the book by David Newell, Teaching Rhythm. Excellent book. And it goes into much more detail. This is going to take place over a couple of weeks at just 1 to 2 minutes a day. So, in video 2, we're going to be talking about 16th notes. I'm going to pick a day that I plan to be to the second book of Essential Elements, number 50, which is where it introduces 16th notes. And I know the day that we're going to first try to read those 16th notes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up about 2 weeks. And about 2 weeks prior to that date, I'm going to start this process. And I'm going to do it in my warm-ups for just about 1 to 2 minutes a day. This is very fast-paced. It's not boring at all. The video I'm going to show you in video 2, it's going to be a little longer video because I'm going to kind of lump all of those days into one video, which means it's going to be kind of a long, drawn-out process. But I want you to imagine it being broken up into small chunks of just a minute or two per day. So what's going to happen is I'm going to play a rhythm just 4 beats long on a tuning note, and the kids are just simply going to echo me on their instruments, on their tuning note. We're going to do this for several days until they get used to the feel and the sound of it. I still haven't talked to them about what it actually is that they're doing. They're just hearing something and they're echoing it. After they get comfortable with producing this sound, I'm going to show them the notation while they're playing. I'm going to flash it on the TV. I'm going to play something, and while they play it, I'm going to then flash it up on the board so they can see what it looks like. Eventually, after several days of doing this, it's going to get to where the kids can just read it on their own, even though I haven't explained it to them yet, because they're starting to draw connections. In fact, at one point I'm going to tell them to do a little mental dictation. I'm going to play a rhythm, and I'm going to ask them to think about what it's going to look like. In their head, they're going to picture it, and then I'm going to flash it on the board, and they're going to see if it matches what was in their head. A game that I like to play that I got from the book is a game where I flash the rhythms really quickly. So what I do is I count off to 4, and then maybe on count 3 I'll just really quickly flash the rhythm, just a split second. So they see an entire measure in just a split second, and they have to remember it. And what this does is it gets them really fast at reading rhythms, and it also teaches them to read a measure as an entire phrase as opposed to just reading a note at a time, and it helps them to make connections and make larger phrases. I said that this is a 3-part series. I've been so far talking about part 2. So in David Newell's book, Teaching Rhythm, one of the final steps that we do is we actually provide a theoretical explanation for all of this rhythm that we've been teaching. So part 2 just kind of goes over the learning to be literate in reading these rhythms. Part 3 finally is going to show another book by David Newell, and it's the theoretical part of it, the Simple Rhythmatician. This is a sort of method book that you can use with your students to really help them understand time signatures and just the math involved in rhythm and the theory behind rhythm. So in part 3, I'm going to give some examples of groups playing through these various exercises so you can see how that goes. What I found, while the Simple Rhythmatician is an extremely effective book, and it really helps kids to understand that even just doing part 2, which comes from the book Teaching Rhythm, that the kids become extremely fluent in reading rhythms. One of the last things I want to say before I wrap up this video is, whenever I first started in Olney, and I was still struggling with rhythm, my groups were playing, actually I'm embarrassed to say it, we were playing grade level 1 and 1.5 songs at contest, and we were even getting 2s on that. It wasn't going well. I put some various things in place, a playoff system that I'm writing a book about that I want to share with you all soon. And also the other big one was this rhythm teaching from David Newell. And within just a few years, we went to playing 3.5s and 4s and getting perfect ratings. So a huge jump, but mainly due to this book teaching rhythm. So I hope this was informative. I hope that these videos will help you with your own quest at teaching rhythms to your students. And you can go on to part 2 now, and I ask you, please, if you enjoy this and you learned anything from this and you are trying it with your kids, please share it with me. I always like to hear your success stories. Thank you.